Where Michigan stands in the internal Locked On podcast poll across the board, as well as all things future schedules coming up on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Wednesday. We are back in doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group, and let's get right into it. We had an internal poll. I didn't actually vote in it due to some technical errors on my end when I tried, but we had a series through Locked On Podcast. So I tell you that I didn't vote in it because I wasn't skewing this at all, is what I needed to tell you here. I had no part in skewing this, but there across the board was a lot of different metrics in the Big Ten, for instance, that were voted on by other Locked On podcast hosts, all of them in the conference. And they determined the order of several different metrics. And we're going to go through some of them here. Going for ranking all of the Big Ten football teams in 2023, the head coaches, the projected starting quarterbacks, the offenses and the defenses, the fan bases, and the overall athletic programs. So, again, me not having any input as the Michigan person, you're really going to like this. You're going to like it a lot. So let's start off with the first ranking. All of the Big Ten football programs for 2023. It is not Ohio State that is in the number one spot. And that tells you how much Michigan has really changed everything in the last 2 years. Because even though there are some polls out there and different things where Michigan is ahead of Ohio State, we still see things like the SP Plus. Sorry, not the SP Plus. The SP Plus is good. The FPI by ESPN that has Ohio State, the number one team in the country. And they have Michigan number 6 behind, perennial powerhouse Texas. So that is a sign of where things are. So here's what they have. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, Maryland, Minnesota, Nebraska, Michigan State, Purdue, Indiana, Northwestern, Rutgers. Not exactly the order I would necessarily have it in. I would look at it probably, I think the top 3, maybe 4 are probably good. I think Iowa probably deserves to be ahead of Wisconsin, but I might vote Wisconsin ahead just because I think that Luke Fickell will have a strong impact in year 1. If you didn't have Braylon Allen, Tanner Mordecai, I think maybe that it might be a little different, but I do think that that's going to be a pretty good program. I think those two are indistinguishable there. I would probably flip Maryland and Illinois. Actually, I'd probably flip Maryland and Minnesota above Illinois. Illinois loses Chase Brown. Illinois loses its defensive coordinator, Ryan Walters. Illinois loses, what's his face? Crindy. Name's not Crindy. DeVito. So I had to go back to high school, or not high school, elementary school, where I had I'm pretty sure I I know his name was Delano, but for some reason, trying to think of the names of people sometimes, as you know, not always great in this head. But Michigan number 1, as we expect, ranking the 14 Big Ten head football coaches. I think this is pretty accurate from what I can see for the most part. I think that there's some things I would change here, but Jim Harbaugh, number 1, then Ryan Day, Brett Bielema, James Franklin, Luke Fickell, Kirk Ferentz, Matt Rule, PJ Fleck, Pat Fitzgerald, Mel Tucker, Mike Locksley, Greg Schiano, Tom Allen, Ryan Walters. Poor Ryan Walters. He hasn't been a head coach for a game, but he's down there at the bottom. I would honestly, and I'm not saying this just to like upset the MSU contingent that likes to just for whatever reason watch this program. I would have Mel Tucker at the bottom because even though he had one really good year you have to give him credit for that one really good year. I don't see it happening again, at least in the immediate future. I can make a case for every one of those other coaches. Like, I would look at Matt Rule and say, yeah, he hasn't coached in the Big Ten yet. Nebraska's a tough place, but far too low. I would look at Kirk Ferentz and Luke Fickell and say, look at what they did with lesser talent. They are, in a way, too low. PJ Fleck has had Minnesota just humming along, getting like 9-10 wins a year. Maybe not 10, but like 9 wins a year. Mike Loxley has at least turned Maryland from a bottom feeder to respectable. Greg Schiano has an impossible task at Rutgers at the moment. Pat Fitzgerald has brought Northwestern to the Big Ten championship game twice. They haven't been very good the last couple years, but I would look at all of these, and even Tom Allen with Indiana. Again, impossible task. Indiana. I mean, and he got 9 Windiana going. Mel Tucker to me is the lowest on the rung, except for maybe Ryan Walters, who we haven't seen coach a game. Rank the projected Big Ten starting quarterbacks for 2023. This I think I like almost exactly as it is. JJ McCarthy is number 1. I mean, the only one that I don't like here is they have Drew Aller number 2 and Talia Tagovailoa number 3. I would have Talia second at least. I think you can make an argument that he could be number 1, but I think JJ is deserved to be in number 1. Then Talia, then Kyle McCord, then Cade McNamara, Tanner Mordecai, Hudson Card, Luke Altmaier, Jeff Sims, Ethan Kaliak-Manis, Noah Kim, Taven Jackson, Ben Bryant, Gavin Wimsatt, or Evan Simon. I think that's mostly good. Drew Aller hasn't really proven anything, which is why I wouldn't have him above Talia. Otherwise, I think we're mostly fine, right? Like, Cade did very well when he was asked to do what he was asked to do for Michigan. That said, I don't think we can look at Cade and say, yeah, that's a guy that's probably going to outduel Kyle McCord, right? But maybe he will. I don't know. I think that's a pretty solid list. Here's what's really surprising to me. Rank all of the Big Ten offenses for 2023. And we're going to leave you with this in this segment. But Michigan is number 1 yet again, ahead of Ohio State. Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Maryland, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, Purdue, Minnesota, Michigan State, Northwestern, Rutgers, Indiana. I think that Iowa is far, far too high. Number 1. Indiana's probably deserving of being in the last place. But no, Iowa should be last place until proven otherwise. Purdue should be up higher until proven otherwise. I know I've been kind of ragging on Purdue a lot this offseason. As far as just what that's going to look like. But I mean, they brought in a good offensive coordinator, and they've got Graham Harrell, and they've got some pieces there that could still work. But Michigan ahead of Ohio State offensively, that is wild to me, because I still think that Ohio State will probably have a pretty good offense. Michigan, it still seems like there's going to be games where they're going to do like they did against Michigan State last year, 29-7, lots of field goals, not necessarily really trying to push the ball downfield. They might score a lot, but settle for things, not necessarily just really try to blow things up. I hope that's not true. It doesn't seem like it's true, according to what Jim Harbaugh said. I just feel like there's going to be some games where that's the case. All right, we've got a couple more categories. We'll reflect a little bit on what we've talked about already, get into these other categories. And then we will talk a little bit about future schedule, because I mapped out what the future schedules are, non-conference, conference alike. We haven't talked about any scheduling as of yet, really, on this show, except for the mailbag 2 weeks ago, whenever that the schedule was released last week. I have no concept of weeks. Anyway, we'll do that here in just one moment. Before we do that, if you want to get into the comfort kingdom, then guess what? I've got just the thing for you. Birddogs is revolutionizing comfort when it comes to your pants and your shorts. Whether you're looking for something dressy, you want to go to the gym, you want to go hit the golf course, you're going to go out to the lake in the summer, anything in between, Birddogs has got you covered. You'll look and you will feel better wearing Birddogs. And you know what? They allow you the versatility of going from the beach to the golf course, right to dinner, or to your next meeting. Take my guy, the machine, Bert Kreischer. He wakes up at his lake house. He goes for a swim, smokes a cigar, grills, chills with his family, all in his summer shorts. That's the dream right there, by the way. So go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. Enter the promo code LockedOnCollege. It's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege, promo code LockedOnCollege. And they'll throw in a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. All right, let's continue on with this list. All of these lists from Locked On. I'm sure that the intention was to do like one an episode. I'm not doing that because it's to sit and talk about 14 head coaches or whatever for an episode. Probably not going to work for us because we already know where Michigan stands in general. What's expected of this Michigan team. So, all right, projected starting quarterbacks we did. Offenses we did. We are on to defenses for 2023. This is the only one that kind of surprises me. Michigan not in first place. Michigan is in second place. Behind Rutgers. No, I'm kidding. Not behind Rutgers. Sorry, that's a cheap shot. I'm sorry to all of you New Jerseyites. I do think Rutgers has a better defense than what people are giving them credit for. I will say that. But 2023 defenses, Iowa is number 1, Michigan's number 2, Ohio State's 3, Penn State 4, Wisconsin 5, Illinois 6, Michigan State 7, Minnesota, Northwestern, Purdue, Maryland, Nebraska, Rutgers, Indiana. I don't know how much my vote would have swayed this. Iowa, if it didn't, like Phil Parker, incredible defensive coordinator. They still have Cooper DeJean, but they lost some pieces, including the captain, the guy that was the leading the charge, Jack Campbell. I don't know that they replicate that, right? And I think they lost Riley Moss, right? I think I could be wrong. I would have Michigan number 1. I just not to homer it up, but I would have Michigan number 1. I definitely would not have Ohio State at number 3. I would have Ohio State at number 6 because I would have Penn State ahead of Ohio State. Yeah, they lost some pieces too, but I have a lot more confidence in the Penn State defense. I would have Wisconsin ahead of Ohio State. I would have Illinois despite losing Ryan Walters, ahead of Ohio State. And then I would, after that, have Minnesota. Ohio State, Minnesota is where I would go. I would have Rutgers up more middle of the pack. I would have Michigan State down near the bottom. I mean, what has Michigan State's defense really done to make anyone say, "Yep, they're right there. They're right there." Michigan State's defense is an absolute dumpster fire. If Michigan was so inclined, and again, it didn't really feel like they were so inclined, they could have scored touchdowns on a lot more of those drives against Michigan State. They didn't feel like they needed to, right? We've seen Jim Harbaugh do this time and time again. That said, their pass defense got better last year. It got better. I'm not saying it was good. I'm not saying it was as bad as it's been. It still wasn't a good defense at all. Blake Corum was running for like 7 yards a pop. 3rd and 5s, they were like, Michigan's like, yeah, we can hand the ball off to Blake Corum. It's fine. It's all good. Rank all 14 Big Ten fan bases. Michigan's middle of the pack here. Nebraska, Ohio State, Iowa, Wisconsin, Penn State, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue, Rutgers, Maryland, Indiana. Honestly, I'm not going to argue too much with that. And I know that that's probably going to get a lot of guff on Locked On Wolverines. I think Michigan's fan base, now that it's kind of the team's doing better, has been better than the typical golf crowd. Remember, there are prominent former Wolverines who have lamented to me privately the lack of atmosphere at a lot of times at Michigan Stadium. That said, I've been witness to some of the best atmospheres. The 2021 Ohio State game was, I think, the best atmosphere I've ever been in. But there was a cumulative effect to that because it was in large part the crowd, but it was also the weather. It was the opponent. It was all of these different things kind of converging, right? I would have a better way to judge that if I was on the field. I wasn't. I was in the press box for that in Washington that year. So I'm not accustomed to being able to really judge compared to being on the sidelines where I am most of the time. I think Ohio State's maybe a little high because I do think that they at least have a fan base all pulling in the same direction. I've been to the shoe 3 times. Only once was it like really like a crazy atmosphere, in my opinion. 2018. I think that Penn State should be much higher. I think Iowa's great. I think Wisconsin should probably be a step higher. Nebraska, I think, is deserving at number 1. I don't have great thoughts, but like the ones that are behind, that are Michigan State and behind, I think Minnesota should be up 1 higher. Everything behind Michigan State, though, or behind Minnesota, Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue, Rutgers, Maryland, Indiana. Yeah, no, they don't fill their stadiums at all. Michigan State is kind of a little bit of a fair weather stadium filler. We've seen that, but for the most part, they fill their stadium. They deserve to be in the upper echelon there. I mean, but the rest, the other ones, the top half, Minnesota up, you're going to get a pretty solid environment there. Nebraska has been a bad team and continues to absolutely pack that stadium. 200, almost 300 straight sellouts, right? You can't argue with that. Last one, and then we move on. Ranking the 14 Big Ten schools by overall athletic programs. Number 1 is Michigan. Again, you can't disagree with that. Because look at how many teams in the last 2 years have won Big Ten championships. Who've been in that running. I mean, we're talking football, basketball. Women's hasn't done that, right? But I mean, they've done really, really well. I mean, wrestling, swimming, gymnastics, softball. I think baseball's in there as well. Baseball is from Bakich when he was around. You can't disagree with it. I mean, it's been a dominant program from top to bottom. It's insane. All right, we're going to spend 10 minutes or so talking about the future schedule. We'll probably not do the Big Ten. We'll say, I know we're like a week late because that came out last week. Now that I remember what weeks are, we'll discuss that at some point, right? But let's get into the non-conference because I just think it's going to be a heck of a lot of fun after this year. So let's do that here in a moment. All right, so I compiled just like an evergreen list of the future opponents, something to do like every year or two for Wolverines Wire, especially in these dry months. I've still got a lot of stuff to work on, right? But just having like that kind of, hey, I probably should. I should probably take a look at that because, right, there's like Google future opponents every now and again, and just to have it there. But this is going to be a very exciting stretch for Michigan after this year, right? So this year, not that exciting. I mean, East Carolina can be exciting. That's one of those teams that sometimes is just like, ooh, they're actually kind of doing something. Then UNLV is not exciting at all unless you're playing them in Vegas. And then Bowling Green. The only exciting part about Bowling Green is having Scott Loeffler and Soup coming back to the big house. So, not a ton there, right? I mean, yeah, you'll see another quarterback you saw last year, and what's his name, the Mizzou guy that went to Indiana, Connor Bazelak. But next year, 2024, it gets real. It gets really real, and it's going to be awesome. Because even with some of these teams that Michigan faces that aren't necessarily that super exciting to see, they're teams that Michigan's never played before. And I'm all for that, right? If you're going to play a team, get the team that you've never played before. Now, Fresno State kicks off the season. Fresno State's like a kind of pretty good team, right? I had a picture of them in my gallery because it's a team that was a top 25 team. So, I mean, I'm gonna check this out real quick. Just sitting here thinking of what have they done recently? I mean, that could be a kind of surprising year. They had 10-4 last year. I could have found a better site to look this up at, but they were 10-4 last year. It's just one of those teams that just like seems like it's frequently like doing pretty good. And even though it's a group of 5 team, they're always in that conversation. They lost to some of the teams you'd expect. USC, Oregon State, who was actually pretty good last year. They beat San Diego State in the Fighting Brady Hoax. And then they beat Washington State in the bowl game, like pretty convincingly. So that was 2022. Let's just do 2021 and we'll move on because we don't need to spend all of our time on this. I mean, they kept Oregon, number 11 Oregon. They were within a score the year before. And that was the week before Oregon went and trounced Ohio State. So Fresno State played Oregon tighter than Ohio State did. They beat UCLA, who was number 13 in the country at that time, who was a pretty good team. So that's a team that can come up and get you. That's not like a just quick rollover type of game. So that 2024, you've got Fresno State, who Michigan's never played, Texas at the Big House, and then Arkansas State, who Michigan's also never played, and gave Ohio State a run for its money for a half. Was it last year or the year before? Can't remember. So that's exciting. And then, of course, in 2024, you get UCLA at home and USC on the road. Wild. That is a fun schedule, right? Moving on to 2025, Michigan faces New Mexico, who it's never played. Oklahoma at Oklahoma. And they've only played Oklahoma once and lost, so you hope to even that out. But like that's a bucket list place for me. And they finish out with Central, which who cares? 2026. Moving on, Western Michigan. I don't care. Western Michigan's the directional school that they seem to play the most. That's not Eastern. Oklahoma at the Big House, and UTEP, who they've never played. 2027 at Texas. 2028 at Washington, 2029 hosting Western Michigan, and then 2033 and 34, you've got home and then away against Notre Dame. It's going to get exciting, man. And then to add that with what the Big Ten schedule is now, it's the fact that you can get USC and UCLA in there. I mean, heck, even like just looking at like 2024. So I will touch on this, I guess. Michigan plays, or actually that's 2025. So I think I'm wrong. I think I'm wrong with what I was going to say. But I mean, even like 2025, I wish they played USC. But I mean, you've got Oklahoma, you've got Nebraska on there. And even though Nebraska hasn't been very good, I mean, they might be really good by then. Or even in 2024, you got USC, you got UCLA, you got Texas, you got Wisconsin. I was asked last week on the mailbag, what would you prefer, the easy schedule or having like big opponents? Give me big opponents every single day of the week. Even if Michigan's not going to be very good in 2024, we don't know what it's going to be. I'll take the big time opponents, right? I'll take that iconic matchup. I mean, it's exciting when you're seeing that other team warming up and you're like, holy crap, that is USC. You know, I get that whenever I see Michigan, Ohio State, but even like Michigan, Georgia, you see Georgia, I'm like, that's Georgia. right? We watched Georgia, seeing Alabama in 2019. Well, 2020 technically. Well, that's Alabama. That's the king of the hill right there. So I want them to get LSU on that schedule some way, somehow. Maybe it'll be postseason. I don't know. That's where I'm at. All right. That's all the thoughts I have on it for the moment. Honestly, I have more thoughts, but I was planning on making this a 2-segment deal, and it didn't work out that way. So anyway, we'll be back with the mailbag on Thursday. Get your questions in. I'll have the thing up on Twitter by the time that you listen to this or watch this. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.